Welcome to RAM Symposium. This hour we're featuring exploring cost share tips for budgets and management. I'm Tracy Trujillo, your moderator for this session. Today's presentation is being recorded. The presentation will last about 60 minutes. All participants are currently muted on the virtual side. During interactive portions, we invite you to unmute, use your video as you feel comfortable. If you have questions or comments, please use the chat feature. I will be monitoring that and get the questions to the presenters up here. Closed captioning is available under the Teams option menu. And there is going to be a post evaluation survey link posted in the chat. So we encourage you all to complete that to help us continue to improve offerings that we put out to campus. My pleasure to introduce our presenters today. It's Liza Hunt and cello Jorge.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Liza Hunt and I'm from engineering. My most extensive background is in pre-award. I'm doing a little bit of post-award right now, but my expertise is definitely more on the pre-award side, budgets and that sort of thing.
I'm Cello and I'm in the sponsored programs on the post-award side. I've been at CSU for about 8 years. I started in OSP as a temp and I was there for like 7 months and then a position opened up and I was able to get the accounting tech 3 position and I did that for a few years. And then we had a fund accountant position open up. So I've kind of moved up in the sponsored programs and currently I'm the financial research accounting manager.
Today, we're going to talk about cost sharing, and the 3 different areas that we're going to cover are cost share basics, work on some terminology, then talk about more specifically on the pre-award side, and then touch upon some post-award considerations as well. Think about cost sharing. I think about it as cost sharing is the funds that are necessary in addition to whatever you're getting from the sponsor to cover the entire cost associated with the project. So I kind of like that picture. Some people like to do a pie, but I don't know. It's more of a food thing. I think of it like a donut. I gotta fill the donut. So that's what it is. So yeah, you need that cream filled if you want your full dough. I think a great place for us to start is get a feel. So online as well as in the room, if you can share a little bit of 2 questions. We have 2 questions. The first is what percentage of either proposals that you budget or projects that you manage contain cost share? You have a feel of how often or how much you see. Okay, while you think, in engineering, I went and I asked my colleagues and said, all right, so what do you think? I said, last month may not be representative, but that was a little less than 25% in the proposals that we budgeted. And we went round and round and we felt like it was more on the pre-award side, more around 15%. So
in the chat, we've got 10%, and then another comment was just high. For me personally, in Warner College, we probably have 50% of ours. Maybe that might be a little high, but at least 40, I'd say, because we do a lot with Colorado State Forest Service, which requires a lot of matching. So
yeah, that's quite a bit.
Yeah,
definitely quite a bit.
99%, Liza.
It seems that way, Valerie. I can tell from the voice. The voice alone, because I can't see you.
Penny Harding, OSP's about 30 to 40% for Team 4, so we're part of Team 4. And we've got 50% right now from Matt, but they are older awards.
So that was pre-award. Those were more pre and post, do you think, some of these responses? Okay, so that's interesting. Okay, it's always fun to hear what people say. The second question, what do you feel is your level of expertise in budgeting cost share proposals and or managing projects that include cost share? You can use that little. Anyone in the room want to share what you think?
That's all right, it's a no edit.
Well, if that's your expertise.
They're difficult.
Becky and Valerie are saying hi. So I would say proficient or expert maybe.
Okay.
And I would have to say the same for myself, probably proficient or expert. I hate to call myself an expert because I always feel like there's always something new in there, but.
Oh, well, especially when the rules keep changing.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Tracy, I agree with you.
And Matt says moderate experience, so.
Thank you, I appreciate it. So let's talk about some cost share types. When we're talking about mandatory cost share, it is required either within the solicitation or via the sponsor. You has to be included. Thing you want to make sure is you never overmatch. Whatever the requirement is, you stop right there. Make sure you just cover to what's required. Voluntary committed is a lovely situation, which we try to avoid. It's when you quantify something at the proposal stage. When you quantify something at the proposal stage, it's one of those negotiation things that show up at the award stage, then we are held to what we say. So then while it's not required, but you volunteer it and you quantify it, it is now committed at the award stage. So definitely discouraged by CSU. Voluntary uncommitted cost share is, again, it's not required. However, for one reason or another, because it's voluntary, CSU still has to track it. So your examples are your key personnel 1% minimum effort and your salary cap.
Another example, I'll chime in really quick that I've seen is PIs will commit, say, 1 month's effort in the budget justification, and then you get into the narrative and they say, but I'm really going to work on it 3 months, but I'm only requesting 1 month's effort on the budget.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Definitely have to watch, or we can talk about a little bit more about that a little bit later too. Okay, cost share sources, cash, that's really nice because, you know, you can apply it how it's needed. In kind, that has to be allowable by the sponsor. Usually the solicitation will say, what are the budget categories that are allowable? When it comes down to it, as far as on the post award, and whenever you're looking at it, when you're trying to apply something, it has to be trackable. It has to be incurred during the budget period. So third party, the difference between these first two columns and the third column is just the fact that when it's third party, whatever is being promised or committed towards a proposed project, we need documentation of it, signed by an authorized person. So we can talk about some budget categories. Again, it has to be allowable by the sponsor. Sometimes unrecovered indirect can be used as a category, assuming it's okay with the sponsor. So anyone want to talk about interesting things in budget categories or things that? All right, Tracy, you're up. She's already laughing.
The most unusual cost share proposed that I got from a PI was a porta potty. They tried in that wasn't during my days, but I heard about that when I came on the team for. An unusual one was a camper trailer. So they were going to be in the field. And in order to do that, because your cost, how you're capturing that cost can't be arbitrary. We had to go out and find a similar rental camper to assign a cost for it. Also had a PI that wanted to use a fishing boat. It was 15 years old. They'd gotten a new motor, had rigged it with nets and fishing gear, and there was no easy way to assign cost to that. So we basically put a kibosh on that, said we need to find another source. Because again, it has to be verified. Can't just be an arbitrary, oh, I need this much, I'm going to assign that much value to that boat.
Absolutely.
So Thank you.
Anything in the chat?
No, okay.
So let's talk about CSU policy. If you haven't recently, or if you haven't, or it hasn't been recent, take a look on the OSP website, just get a good read on it. If it's been a while, that we've provided some links to some great resources. I'm only going to cover a few things that may not have already been covered in previous slides in regards to the policy. Other great resources, the Cost Share 101 has some really great summary associated with the policy as well. And then just looking at the FPI, just the policies that CSU has, the financial rules and such, are great. I did mention this earlier, it should be limited to the amount that's required by the sponsor, don't overpromise. Voluntary committed cost share cannot be used as a factor during merit reviews. So it's not, if you put X amount, you can get more, a higher score in the review of a proposal, thus making it more fundable, if you will. CSU does have to have separate accounts associated with cost share outside of the 5.3 accounts for whatever the need is for the cost share account. I think the most important are these last three, just the fact that it can be detrimental when whatever the cost share just makes it harder or just reduces the flexibility of researchers to do whatever they should be doing. Anytime when we create cost share, like voluntary cost share that now becomes committed, it just continues to create administrative burden for post-award, for OSP, things like that. The big thing for me is just the fact that it just ticks down at our indirect cost recovery rate. And so it definitely makes a big deal. Every time we cost share, we don't claim the full indirect costs associated with the project. Key personnel. So the rule is everyone in the key personnel category has to provide a minimum of 1% effort in each budget period. It has to either be on the sponsor request side, or if it's not there, then if it's on the cost share side, because they're putting their effort there. If it's neither, then you have to do non-reportable cost share. So keep that in mind. There should be, when you're working in KR, you need a separate budget labeled differently so we know that that's not the budget using for submission, but so you can document what that number is. We have provided a lot of good links, so take a look there. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay, good. Okay, we're just going to cover some pre-award considerations. Something I found interesting is that, which I guess it's not surprising, but it was just definitely interesting, is just how different each of the different colleges or units proceed in getting the documentation regarding cost share. It just differs. Some do the ICF, some do an unsigned CSA. A lot of, it just depends. So I guess part of me wants to know, who can tell me, which do they do and how far in the signing process do you not do it at all at the pre-award stage?
I'm in OEE. So far from what I've learned, I'm new, but we usually do a full signed CSA at the proposal stage.
Okay. Appreciate that.
Warner, we do the CSA proposal stage and have just recently started routing just so it doesn't hold up because we find that we're not making, the changes are pretty minimal if we have to make them at board. We only use the ICF form if we have commitments from, say, the college level, vice president's office, something out beyond just the PI's, unrestricted account, like for salaries. So,
For sure, for sure.
yeah. DHHS says ICF at proposal stage.
And engineer does ICF at proposal stage site. And it's what you just said. Oh, wait. Well, that's not, but so the, when you do commit something at the proposal stage, a PI can't say, oh, I'm gonna apply for this proposal too, and yeah, that cost share, I wanna use that too. No, once you commit your cost share toward a proposal, you can't promise that same amount of funds on another proposal until you find out the result if the proposal A gets funded or not. So something to keep in mind, in that regard. We mentioned that earlier, third party requires a detailed letter. This is, interesting information to share. CSU is working on a revision to the proposal submission process where they are going to require, if your unit doesn't already, to have an ICF or a CSA. The question is, are they going to have it required that it's signed or unsigned? And we're not quite sure on the timing, but just know that it's out there. Yes.
What's the difference between the ICF and the CSA? That's something I did in the first one, which I think.
Okay, so in engineering, we actually have our own form other than the one that's on the OSP website. It looks slightly different. The CSA is the form, and we will discuss that. Charles is going to discuss that a little bit later, but the CSA is the form that must be signed before the 5.3 is created. So the ICF it has very similar information, all the project information, the budget amounts, the account numbers, and you sign.
The OSP ICF form does not have a place for account numbers.
Yeah.
It has all the signatures and the amount you're committing from either, it allows for vice president level, college level, multiple departments. So if you're, in that kind of situation. So I'm currently working on one, so I just pulled it down, so it's on it. I'm like, okay, I need to do both the CSA because I've got to send it to our college to get their commitment and cost share accounts. So I'm gonna do them both in tandem at the same time. Because CSA includes the account numbers and the breakdown of the budget for what your cost sharing categories.
Yeah, so in engineering, what we usually do is we create that situation and we work closely with the post award side so that when we have funding information, they can easily go into the pre-award files, pull the information, create the CSA, and get that thing signed. Unless there's some kind of budget change, it's all there. That's a great question.
So my question on doing the CSA form is if at proposal, we set aside an account number and then it's not awarded. We've identified that account number,
But nothing happens to it.
nothing happens to it.
Right.
But if it could be taken in that time frame. I guess I don't understand assigning an account number at the beginning when we're not necessarily going to use it and somebody else could take it in the time frame before we actually want to use it.
I get that, because when you do commit it, it's and signed and that sort of thing, that's an amount of money that could be applied somewhere else. It's a very good question. It's completely legit. I don't have an answer for that. I don't know that there is a good answer for that.
Well, I wouldn't anticipate that OSP is going to create the cost share accounts.
Yeah, they don't create the account.
Until the award is there.
Right.
But I think it's a way for them to make sure that people identify a source and they have documentation of it, the proposal, that, hey, you remember, you named this account and this is the amount, because I would suspect, because I've seen this in my own college, where I had a PI propose cost sharing travel funds, that her department head gave her a little pot of money. Well, by the time that proposal was funded, she spent those travel funds already, so she had to come up with another cost share.
Yeah.
So I would suspect that's part of the issue that they're trying to address. I don't know. Again, if you're naming a source account in your mind, you want to keep an eye on what you promised in there so you don't double count those dollars somewhere else. But I can't imagine OSP would create that account at proposal. It's just again, to make sure they have a better lockdown and understanding from all parties of what you promised, in the proposal.
We would create the account, it would just be the source, and I had asked Liza that too, you know, they're providing the fund source and they have all these proposals going, but they've got some kind of internal system so they can keep track of what they are proposing, so they don't double cost share or try to cost share
Yeah.
those funds, so.
Good question. So best practices. Your cost share information needs to be part of the record. Definitely. It depends. In certain areas, it depends on your unit if you have to get it signed, but it's not necessary by OSP that you get it signed at the proposal stage for now. But this is where you said something earlier. You said it can hold up the creation of the 5.3 if upon award, you don't have your CSA signed. So keep that in mind. This is something that we do, which you did mention earlier too, Tracy. It's when a budget says something, but the justification says something different. So in our unit, we pay attention to these little additional phrasing that may occur. It's usually two places. One is a budget justification, and the second place is in the facilities. So those are the two places where extra verbiage can get a PI in trouble. So we watch for additional information that should be just deleted or changed. In the facilities, sometimes when they want to discuss certain things that are available, but we don't want it to be voluntary, committed cost share at the end, you know, upon an award decision, is to use the word leveraging. And making sure when you use the word leverage, that you do not quantify, because as soon as you quantify it, then it's cost share. So, yes.
One other thing besides just quantification is if you have a PI that says, I'm only gonna commit 1% effort, and then they list very specifically a huge amount of tasks in that proposal. Those two don't
Match up.
they don't match up. That can also be construed as cost share. So between the verbiage where they're quantifying something, you also want to be careful that, you know, they're justifying what they need, but don't get too far down in the weeds where the sponsor's going to look at it and say, there's no way you can do all these things at 1% effort. Because you're basically inferring cost share. So.
Okay, so I have a case study. I tried to get it as clear as possible. This is a real solicitation that came across my desk. There's three consecutive slides, and I'd love for you to just read and just gather information, and then we can discuss what you see on these 3 slides. So what do we see so far?
They're quantifying the leverage.
You're quantifying the leveraging. That is,
Sure.
yes, they are.
But program does not require cost share, so they can't do that. So you contact the contracting officer or the sponsor.
Oh, yeah, well, this solicitation gets fun. So, yes, it's inconsistent, first of all. First, it says it does not require, and then they say that it does. Say, great, thank you. All right, next slide.
Sure.
Does it say federal solicitation?
Okay, so what do we see here? Is anyone commenting online?
What do you suggest when the RFP says specifically that cost share will increase scoring review? It seems sort of voluntary, but no way would be funded without some cost share.
And who said
That's from
that?
Stephanie.
Stephanie, that's a
HHS.
very good. Hi, Stephanie. It's a really good question. I'm not sure how things may or may not have changed. When Diane Barrett was here, she said, if you see a solicitation like that, send her. So I guess now just send OSP the solicitation. I just work with your team. And they're supposed to send it up to COGR, and was it the Council of
Governmental relations.
Thank you, Council of Government Relations. It's basically universities, institutes, medical centers that try to advocate when working with the federal government. That's who COGR is. We're supposed to say, because you can't do it. Uniform guidance says you can't do it, and yet it happens. So we can get to what we do, but anybody else want to say?
I have one more comment when you're ready.
Okay, yes.
Jenny Harding, OSP, we should not be cost sharing on these. These RFPs should also be sent to Bill Mosley. I guess he's in his new role.
Okay, great.
with compliance.
Thank
We
you.
keep track of the sponsors that are using language that state proposals are reviewed more favorably, et cetera. Because, yeah, when uniform guidance came along, feds were not supposed to be including ambiguous language like this. It's either mandatory or it's not. You can't put it in there that it's gonna give you a more favorable review.
Can I ask, is uniform guidance applicable here? Is it a grant? Or cooperative agreement?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they
Federal
should be.
solicitation.
That's why this is such an excellent example. And
And
this-
we have-
it still comes across regardless if it's supposed to happen.
And private foundation RFPs, Stephanie's got a question about that. We wouldn't send that up to COGR because they're not a government institution. But I would suggest reaching out to your team, look at the language, because yeah, private foundations, it's kind of, if you're gonna play, you gotta pay to play and you gotta go by their rules. So it may be a situation where you have to cost share. And then it would be just a matter of getting reviewed by your team and documenting that is more mandatory than voluntary when they're putting kind of strong language, encouraging it.
Is there a different level that we go through? I can't remember the people's name. We get an email once a month about the foundations. Is that Sam?
Sam,
Yeah. Do we work with them in a case like that?
If it's a
it's a managed sponsor.
Yeah.
You can check with them. My experience with development is they're not as well versed in OSP rules and regs, so should work with
Your
both
team. I
your
work with your
team and, because I've had situations where they advise a PI and then it comes all the way down the pipe thinking it's going to be a gift, for example, and it's not. So I would encourage you to work with both your team.
I agree. I agree. So this is just a little, the rest of it, and I did not identify the sponsor. Just the rest. So more fun reading with that. These are all the sections associated with the budget, the lovely scoring. This proposal, when it came, we read the solicitation, I shared it with my colleagues in pre-award, and our team is Bill, was team one, so we sent it up to Bill, and he basically said exactly what Tracy said. If the PI wants to submit, and we went back to the PI, we said, this is exactly what's happening, this is voluntary cost share, and he still wanted to submit. So we did submit. Very reluctantly, I worked on the budget because I didn't think it was right, but I did, and it was a good proposal. It did not get funded. And part of me wonders, did it not get funded because of that scoring? Because we stopped right at the minimum. So I think it was the, you have to have a minimum match of 25%. That's where we stopped. We didn't do any more than that. Who knows? I don't know why it did or didn't, but that was the situation with that. Okay, cost share calculations. Read the solicitation. Just find out allowable budget categories. He said that about the unrecovered indirect rate can be used. Find out, are we talking about, is the rate that they're saying, is it associated with total project costs? Or is it regarding total, the sponsored requested funds? That makes a difference. So just in case anyone needs a refresher, ta-da, I just did it. So the left-hand side has sponsor requests. 100K, cost share rate is 10% of the sponsor requested funds. So how much is cost share? Cost share is 10% of 100K, so it's 10K. And then total project cost is the sponsor requested funds, 100K plus the 10K is 110K total project cost. Okay, that's sponsor request. The right-hand side is total project cost. Sponsor request is 100K. We have to provide cost share of 10% of total project costs. So total project costs, if you think about it, if 10% is cost share, that means the sponsor request has to be 90%. So basically, when you make this calculation, you gotta adjust it to what that would be. So 100K divided by 0.9 is $111,000. $111 is total project costs. If you subtract 100K from the $111,111, you get cost share of $11,111. That's okay, cool. We good online?
Yep, I do have surprising, have no comment. We're working on an IFWIP proposal. As a 25% match requirement does not stipulate sponsor request or total project costs. The PI is going with total project costs. I reached out to the PI and said, do you have documentation? Did somebody tell you that? Because otherwise it's $3,000 cheaper for us to just calculate on the sponsor budget. So I'm waiting for that response, but that's just kind of a notation for y'all to kind of watch out. And you can't just assume that the PI, we need to know, where did you get that? Kind of like if we're getting a lower indirect cost rate, we need documentation from the sponsor.
Right.
And it's not in the RFP anywhere that I can see, so.
So tips on that, when there's something inconsistent, I go, is there FAQs? Or sometimes some weird solicitations will actually have an example. If you look at the example, you know what they mean, though they don't say it. All right, based on this example, it has to mean this. So if you're lucky and there's an example, it tells you FAQs, contact the person that's authored, whoever the contact is associated with the solicitation. Those are other things that you can do to figure out, well, what exactly do you mean? And hopefully you have enough time
Yeah.
to get the answer you need to get the
And
budget
if it's
through.
like NIFWIF, you're gonna have links and links and links. You have to go clicking in several different places. Because the basic RFP had minimal information, there was a link, went there, then there was another link, so it's time consuming, and some sponsors are better than others, but you have to dig into those links to see if you can find that documentation.
So here are PD best practices. If it's mandatory, it has to be part of the submitted budget. If for some reason you need to create separate budgets for forms, feel free to do so. Just mark it accordingly so you know that that's not this part of the submitted budget that you're doing for review. Same thing for your 1% minimum effort. This is something I don't have experience with, working system to system, but this is information that was shared via the SRAs via Shannon. So thank you very much, SRAs, for sharing that tidbit right there. If anyone wants to add to it, feel free. I can't speak to it if anyone has questions on it too.
I haven't done an S2S with NIH because I used to support the vet college. But we did include in the sponsored budget, you had to include the cost share, because it's
Oh, yeah.
over the salary cap, but as far as the S2S, I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah. Anyone in the chat have anything to say? Okay,
Chat.
then it's you and I will.
Okay, so we're gonna talk about some post-award considerations, and as I go through the slides, I'm also gonna talk about some of the reorganization changes and process changes that's going on in OSP right now. So I'm gonna start off with the cost share account request form. So we've got two cost share account request forms out there. One for mandatory, voluntary, the salary cap, it's all on this form. Any third party you've got to fill out that form. This one right here is the 1% minimum effort. So we have two forms because we require a lot more signatures on the first form and not so many on the 1% minimum effort. And you can find these forms on the link there. As they had mentioned earlier, we do not start 5-3 accounts until we have these forms filled out and signed. So that will hold up your 5-3 account if you're waiting on that. Some of the typical CS sources that are used are coming from 13 fund source, 14, 15, 16, 17, 19, 64. I know there are other fund sources out there and those are not typical. For example, the 77 funds, we have to get facilities involved, BFS involved, campus services. So if you're trying to use a fund source that is not on here, please reach out ahead of time. So we can make sure, one, it can be done, and two, getting it done, there's a long process for the 77. Recently there was a 99 and they've got to work with campus services and there's like some kind of other form, I can't remember what form is with the 99s, but I don't want to say it's GASB, but it's something like that. So anyway, if it's not a typical form, please reach out ahead of time so we can make sure we can actually do it and start that process going. Another source is 5-3s. We can use some 5-3s. We have to have sponsor approval though in order to use that. And generally we do not use federal sponsor or federal funds. That's usually not allowed. I have seen one in my time here, so
Nightmare.
yes, it is a nightmare. So yeah, and if it's a 5-3, we gotta get approval from both sides and the source to making sure we got approval from them. Sometimes there are differences on the cost share account form versus the award. So sometimes it's routed, it gets signed, and then when the award comes in, it's different. If it's more than what was proposed, then you don't have to fill out a new cost share account form, but we do need documentation that you are aware that there's more cost share that's required. And an email will suffice in those instances. So don't rely on your cost share account form. I know sometimes people are relying on that. Really rely on the award document and what's been entered in RPS, which we'll go over in a minute. But RPS, we enter all the award stuff in KR and then KR flows to RPS. So, and if you think it's wrong or something's wrong, please reach out so we can make sure we have the correct information on RPS. And so, as I had mentioned, if an award document cites a cost share commitment that is greater, or if there's a modification that comes in and that increases the cost share, we don't need another form unless it's a new cost share account that's required. So if you have to get another cost share account, then we'll need a new form. But so if a mod comes in, they're requesting more cost share, we don't have to go through the cost share account form again, but we do need an email when you do need documentation that you are aware and you accept the cost share.
Does that documentation need to be from the department head in the college, especially if it's more funds?
Probably, yes, I would guess, yes.
There is an option on the CSA form too, which you're gonna do, never mind. We're just gonna mention that because we do that where we just don't route it.
Yep, so there are two sections that I'm gonna talk about on the form. So a companion cost share account can only be tied to one 5-3 account, and that's because of the effort reporting system that we have in place and for audit purposes. If you do know that you say you get a 5-year award, but every budget period, you gotta get a modification and a carry forward is not allowed. So every year, you're gonna have to get a new 5-3. So every year, you're gonna have to get a new cost share account. So in those instances, we created this little section where you get all the signatures for that first year, and that's considered the master form. And then every subsequent year after that, you just have to check box this little thing and then just submit it straight to OSP. So you're not having to route for all the signatures. Again. And then another section I just wanted to highlight, IDC so sometimes we can cost share the indirect cost on the cost share account. So we can calculate indirect cost on the cost share, and that's used as cost share. I've seen where they say, no, you cannot calculate indirect costs on the cost share, and usually those 5.3s don't get indirect either. So we've got two little fields here. The first one is indirect for the cost share account, and then this UIC, the undercovered indirect, that's if, say, we get awarded, we should be getting 52%, but they're only gonna give us 10%. So that difference there, we can use as cost share. So that's the unrecovered part of it. And we can also sometimes claim unrecovered on the cost share account. So that would all be lumped in to that field there. And really, we would really like to see all your calculations to help make sure like the right rates were used properly, the right rates, and where those numbers came from, because we do double check these amounts when we get them in OSP. And then we also got the third party section here. I did want to mention, if you only have unrecovered cost share or unrecovered indirect as cost share, you do not need a form. So no form if it's only that. But if you've got that on top of third party and cost share accounts, then you'll want to enter all that information here. So were there any questions on any other parts of the form that you all might have?
I have a weird question.
Go for it.
With all of the changes in the indirect cost rate, so like we're at 53, how does that play out? When you've got something budgeted versus you're in the
Yeah,
middle, or it changes, or like,
we're working through all that right now. We have some guidance on things that we definitely need to change, and we're working on getting those changed. And then, yeah, figuring out what the cost share is. So that's all working on.
oh, that sounds like fun, Paul.
And trying to get all that figured out. So yes, there's gonna be some craziness with all those rates, all the new rates now. Cost share info and RPS, so I'm pretty sure everyone's probably familiar with RPS. There's the link, you can look up 5.3 accounts, and there's a lot of information provided out there for you. And one of the sections is cost share under additional information. And as you can see the different types of cost shares. So it's mandatory CSU, or if you've got the 1%, it'll say it right there under the cost share type, and then any of the account numbers that are associated with that. And then we also break it out by budget. This 0000, that's third party. So that's the third party line, and then also by personnel and F&A. And this F&A is a lump sum, so if you've got indirect on the cost share and unrecovered indirect, it's just all lumped into that amount. So really, we're actually working on some standard formatting with the comments. So everyone's on board on how we want to see all the details split out, because really the details really matter, especially when we cut to the end, and we've had so much transition, just having it all laid out helps in researching and digging and figuring out what's going on. That's it for that slide. Okay, award terms and conditions. So what do you look for in an award to see if it has cost share? So every award is different. Even within sponsors, I was looking at different awards, and they're all similar, and then there was one different one. So you do get familiar with, you work with some sponsors all the time. I know USD Forest Service, they're really good at spelling out the cost share. And they've also got the financial plan at the end of the award, so you can go and look at it there. Sometimes they call it recipient share, match, cost share. So you've got to really look for all those words within the award. Some of them have it on the face of the award document. So there's not one place that you can look for it, unfortunately. And I know OEdit's pretty good about spelling out the cost share, and they usually have the breakout in the award document. So, yeah, OEdit's fun. Unrecovered indirect costs. So that generally is not allowed. Some sponsors do allow, and if they do allow it, they usually do have something in the award document stating that, or in the terms and conditions, or in the solicitation. So, and also re-budgeting. usually is generally not allowed. Or not allowed, it usually needs sponsor approval, I'm sorry. And you can find more information at 200.308. So if you are, you originally were gonna use CSU funds, and then somehow a third party's like, oh, I want a cost share, and you wanna say, okay, I'm gonna use these funds instead, and not so much of the CSU funds, well, we're gonna need to get sponsor approval for that to make sure that it's allowed. We do have this, FDP matrix. It's called the prior approval matrix. And if you guys are not familiar with FDP, it stands for Federal Demonstration Partnership. And it's a cooperative initiative with 10 federal agencies and 154 institutions. And the whole point of them is to reduce admin burden. So they've created a matrix, and you can go look for it, when prior approval for rebudgeting or for unrecovered indirect costs to be used as cost share. And for the most part, a lot of them have waived the prior approval on the unrecovered indirect costs. For instance, NSF, DOE, NIH, USDA. So if you go check out that matrix, you'll see that information there. And then changes in the improved cost sharing or matching provided by the non-federal entity. So the only one that was waived on there for prior approval for rebudgeting was USD NIFA, but they had an exception. Reduction needs prior approval. It was very rare that you can just rebudget cost share. So just make sure you look into the award doc and find that information. Okay, so account info. So OSP creates the accounts. We create all the cost share accounts, and you guys may have been familiar that Kim Brenzel used to be the one to create the cost share accounts. With the reorganization that we're going through, we have now an award setup team, and they start on Monday. Yeah, I want to get people in. So there's an onboarding process and training and stuff, so it'll be a few weeks before they actually start creating accounts. But they will also be creating the cost share accounts and the 88 WIP accounts. So it's, that we're gonna reduce that lag time. When they create the 5-3 account, they'll be creating the cost share account at the same time. So that will help with the departments to manage your accounts. Immediately, you can tie them together however you guys reconcile, manage your accounts. So we just create it, and then it's up to the departments to manage their accounts. So you're adding the budget, and you really need to be adding the budget from the source that you provided. You're managing and making sure that all the charges are being posted to the account, and then even all the way through closeout. And I provided some cost share title examples. So we always start every cost share account with CSA for cost share. NR stands for non-reportable, so those are all for the 1% accounts. And then this is the account that it's cost sharing for, so that's a 5-3, and then these are the source of the funds for the cost share account. And then we always end with whatever the 5-3 project is. Oh, one more thing, another part of the change. So the award setup team is creating the accounts, and then with the new FRA structure, they will be reviewing all the accounts. So they'll be checking, the award, for all the data information, the budgets, the end dates, project dates, all of that stuff, and cost share. So there will be a second set of eyes, which is something we've never had. So that's really good with this reorg that's happening, to be able to make sure everything's set up correctly from the beginning. And so I know we have a lot of issues sometimes at the end of the award, and it's just a pain trying to figure it all out. So now we've got more checks and balances in place with this reorg, which is going to be really good. So. So tracking cost share is very manual. We have a lot of shadow spreadsheets in OSP, and this is an example of one of them. So we've got a lot of information, but we usually have third-party stuff up on top, and then we break it out by cost share accounts and by fiscal year. And then the rates will change, per fiscal year. We've got zeros here, but they've got to change depending on how much I see we're charging, if we're charging unrecovered indirect. So it's a lot of information, but that's really how we have to track it. And some of them have several cost share accounts.
You guys have a question. Becky, go ahead if you want to unmute and ask your question.
Yes, my question is, even though it's up to the department to track this cost share, is there checks and balances that OSP does to make sure that it is in line with what was proposed? I mean, we're doing it, but what if we have an error and who catches that?
So that is also gonna be something that with this new reorg and the restructuring and the new duties of the FRA is to be looking into detail in more of the accounts and the cost share accounts and stuff, so.
Thank you.
So how do departments, do you guys have shadow spreadsheets too? How do you guys track it?
I
We
do
have,
track it with a spreadsheet. I do track it with a spreadsheet, pretty similar to this, but it was actually a spreadsheet that was developed from OSP when Rhonda worked there, and it's been extremely useful to our team.
Way back.
I feel like I know that name.
Multiplier.
Okay, yeah.
She was on team 4, or that she managed SEMO
I remember seeing her name in some of the file.
years ago.
Okay, so that's kind of what one of our spreadsheets looks like. Next slide, please. Subrecipients. So I know it's a challenge with subrecipients. Also, we've got a sub-award team and they're the ones that send out the invoices, and they also have a shadow spreadsheet, and we use their information and use it as backup and embed it in our other shadow spreadsheet. But they're really good about capturing the data, and then also if the sub is not meeting, Steve in the sub-award team, he will reach out and be like, why are you meeting this? What's going on? We need some kind of letter, some form of documentation. So he's really good about keeping track of the subrecipients. Third-party cost share. So third party is very tricky. I know there's a lot of questions and confusion when it comes to third party. We've got a form out there. It's not really accessible to the departments at the moment. I'm gonna work on seeing if we can get it on the website. I think that might help some people. But we've just got it on H drive in OSP right now. But it's up to the fiscal officer to get the documentation from the third party. And then we really need to have a value of whatever the donated materials and supplies are. The dates that they cost shared, if there was any material and equipment, and then a signature and their name. Just recently, we had an award, and it was a 3-year award. It came to the end, and it was third-party cost share, but it all happened in the first year, so we didn't have any of that documentation. And so it was a real nightmare trying to reach out, because none of the people that were at that organization was there anymore. They were able to get it though, but it's just things like that, just trying to stay on top of it and be proactive, getting all that information. Next slide. And so with that, I wanted to mention, so one of the other process changes that's gonna happen in OSP with the reorg is the requirement of semi-annual reviews. So, I mean, every account mostly gets touched. Some of them are just invoicing though, so there's not really a dig in usually until maybe the end. But they're gonna be required from the start of the project every 6 months until the project is closed to review into detail. We're gonna be looking at payments, at expenses, cost share expenses, and all that stuff. So there's gonna be a lot more communication coming from OSP if they have questions on your accounts. And then also to help you guys to keep track of the cost share and stuff, making sure we are meeting it in a timely manner, and stuff like that. So, I mean, we're all a team. We're trying our best, to help these PIs. So we really want to we're trying to work with you guys so we can all be in compliance and get everything submitted and met. Is there anything else or any suggestions that OSP can do to help you guys keep track of any of the cost share or any issues. If you have any, you can just shoot me an email. And then, but so that's what we're trying to do to help. And then if multi-unit involvement, I think really just staying in communication with all the departments, whoever's involved, and making sure everyone's on the same page and stuff, so. Next page. So we do report cost share. We've got SF 270s, which is standard form 270s, and SF 425s, those are usually the federal forms. And they can be sent either monthly, quarterly. SF 425s can be on quarterly, annual, or just the final. So it just depends on the sponsor. We also have our own CSU invoice and we report it there. Sponsor invoice and forms, sometimes they like a lot more detail on their forms, so we're having to break out a lot more information. And we do not report on salary cap or 1%. So we are still tracking it, but we don't report that to the sponsor. So. And if we don't meet cost share, so failure to meet cost share commitments is the failure of the university to abide by the conditions of the award. It puts the entire university at risk. And it also puts the project at risk of being deemed non-compliant, and we may have to return the funds. So recently I was helping out with final invoicing over the summer, and I had an OEdit one, and we met it. But the information that I had to provide to them, it didn't have a breakout. It was just like the total, and then I had to provide the report manager reports. And so he was only looking at the first year. He's like, y'all didn't meet it. I want our money back. Like, he was already like, he send it. Here's what you can send. I'm like, no, we met it. And so then I provided the breakouts we had, because fringe isn't on the cost share accounts usually. So they calculate the fringe and show them. Well, so pretty much I kind of give him a snippet of the spreadsheet where I'm calculating it. He's like, okay, cool. So, but I mean, OEdit, they're pretty strict about their cost share. Yeah. So I just wanted to share that. But yeah, I don't know if I've ever seen someone reduce it or any accounts that I manage. So here's just some cost share info at CSU. So 18% of the accounts that 5.3, these are active open accounts. And I think we've got like 4,300 accounts open right now. And out of that, 18% of them have cost share. And that I'm just looking at all, whether it's 1%, third party, just any kind of cost share. And then as of the end of fiscal year 22, this is outstanding CSU commitment. So this isn't third party stuff. 13 million that we need to still meet. So, yeah. And that can be within the next year or 5 years or however long the projects are. So, but that was pretty interesting.
It's a nice floating number.
Yeah. But it's a burden though, just a reminder, cost share is a burden for everyone. You know, that I know how hard it is for the departments, OSP2, at pre-award, at post-award, all over. So
We're kind of close to time.
I know I was trying to wrap
Thank you. I know we don't really have time for questions. If you have questions, our email addresses are here. Feel free to email. We may not have the answers, but we can facilitate getting better answers for you. How's that? So, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I had to have those back. Okay.